This is the Erasing Shame podcast. This is DJ Chuang, your host, and I'm joined with Brian S. Chan. He is a artist based in Burbank near Hollywood. He went to the same seminary I did, Dallas Theological Seminary. He's written a couple books. We'll talk about the books, or at least mention them. But today's main topic is beauty versus depression. Brian, thanks for joining me for our conversation.
Thank you, DJ. Thanks for having me on here.
Yeah, so I recently was part of a workshop that you did called Beauty versus Depression. It was really engaging. I love the way you teach interactively. And I'm guessing that comes out of not only your personal experience, but also your studies and your teachings on the topic of beauty.
Yes.
So let's start with how you got into this theme of beauty, because we kind of hear it mentioned in spiritual and theological conversations, but there's not much thought given to it. And you're probably one of the thought leaders, if I may use that phrase loosely.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thanks for asking that question. And beauty is something that I feel like we see prevalent in our world all the time. It affects daily life and affects self-image a lot. And it also affects emotions and what people are attracted to. So as an artist, when I was at Dallas Theological Seminary, I did a study on the beauty of God. And how I got into that was because I saw that in the history of our faith, beauty and art was very much incorporated in our faith. So I did a deeper dive into a theological study of that, looked in scripture, and found so much that scripture actually either speaks to beauty or incorporates beauty in the way it communicates truth, portrays God, in the way it portrays what a beautiful life looks like or a beautiful person looks like, beyond the physical. Oftentimes, mostly is focused on the internal values of a person, the faith of a person. And so that just got me real fired up. And then especially what I discovered in my study was the connection between beauty and love, which is normally assumed in a lot of our culture, right? In our plays and our stories, beauty and love. But I found that to be so fervent in the scriptures. And so that became very important to me, because if there's a great motivator in life, it's love. And if beauty can inspire that love or direct that love, boy, that's a powerful, powerful thing that beauty can be in a person's life. And so that's how it all kind of began. And it led into a thesis research, and that led into me teaching a class, developing a class at Biola University on beauty and spirituality. And that led me to writing a book on it. Yeah.
And the title of the book is?
The book is called The Purple Curtain, Living Out Beauty and Faith and Culture from a Biblical Perspective.
Wow. Now, is it accessible to normal people, or do you need a theology degree?
Well, it is based on theological content, but is written for the everyday person to read.
Very good.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll add a link in the show notes so people can get a copy of the book and perhaps preview it. And our conversation will revolve around that, because that's very much a foundational starting point of where you've drawn so many lessons about beauty, love, life, faith, and even mental health.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, I picked a background today for those of you that are watching the video version of Erasing Shame, and that's the ocean at Laguna Beach, I believe. And there's something that inspires the human soul, whether you're Christian or not, when it comes to beauty.
Yes.
And in our world of media, Instagram, Hollywood, television, beauty becomes almost a commodity and exploited for personal gain, for attention, for monetary goods. But there's actually it's very powerful. So used for ill, but it's actually very powerful used for good.
That's right. Yeah. And that's one of the, it's too bad that beauty can be commodified, and commercialized. And then it keeps beauty on the surface while true beauty, genuine beauty as God intended, where it's meant to promote human flourishing. It is meant to
Mm.
nurture the soul. And you use the word in reference to your background to inspire. And yes, beauty inspires, right? It gives us a vision for something greater, wonderful, delightful. And when you think of the word inspiration, it is actually the opposite effect of what depression is trying to do. Depression unchecked is heading towards a certain direction, which is downward, to despair
Mm.
or a downward spiral. Inspiration is a lifting up. It is a seeing bigger. It is a invigoration, for life and for what's ahead. So beauty is posing an opposite force to depression, and that's how I
Oh.
phrased it. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, you put together a wonderful workshop, and perhaps we'll hear some good feedback from this podcast to gather a crowd that would say, "Hey, would you teach that class again?" So that would
Oh
be
yeah.
a huge opportunity. But
Hmm.
you really juxtaposed how beauty versus depression can
Hmm.
kind of do battle together.
Yeah.
And so unpack that a little bit. What happens to someone in that depressive state? Everything looks dark and gloomy, and there's no hope, and there's no motivation to even get out of bed sometimes,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of negative thinking clouding our mind, and our emotions are just stuck.
Hmm.
So, how does beauty change that?
Yeah, and the way you laid out all those kind of symptoms, if you will, of depression
Hmm.
is really good for us to identify what we're talking about when we say depression. It is a little bit more than just sadness, right? Is something you mentioned is like it's hard to get out of bed, so where it starts to affect daily function.
Hmm.
And there's that sense of gloom where you look through, it's like looking through a hazy glass where everything seems gray and gloomy. Even the most brightest things may seem gloomy. And beauty is also a lens. Beauty is also
Mm.
in the Bible, beauty is associated with light, with glory. So it's like light peering through. And sometimes I think when you experience beauty, it's trying to peer through the darkness of depression, even if it's a
Mm.
small keyhole kind of light. And so little by little, it is trying to cure, heal, the depression, pull you out of it, you know and it doesn't mean that we can't have the moments where we need to sit in that space to feel that gloom, because there might be good reason for it, and we can't
Mhm.
ignore or deny the emotions that we have, the pain that we might be experiencing, but we don't have to
Mhm.
stay in it. The other word you said was stuck. That's the best. I think that's one of the keys. We don't have to be stuck, and beauty is
Mhm.
meant to remind us that there is something far more in the world and in life and what God is doing in our lives than just the gloom that we see. And so that leads to one thing I'll touch on real quickly, which is it leads to needing to define what true beauty is. What is biblical beauty?
Mhm.
And by understanding that, we see how it counteracts depression. Well, I'll name a
Mhm.
couple of things, which is one, true beauty contains truth. Well, depression,
Mm.
you ever had those really depressive spiraling moments where you're mentally spiraling downward and you hear these voices in your head? They're always negative. You're no
Mhm.
good, your life is worth nothing,
Yes.
but they're lies, right? They're lies. Now, true beauty based in truth, okay, is illuminating, revealing truth back to us.
Mm.
And it's more than just telling you that, hey, you're worth something, but beauty is trying to draw you into an experience of what that
Mm.
worth, that dignity really means. That's the truth. So that's the power of beauty, is because of it's an aesthetic. Beauty is something experienced. So it's not
Mm.
just something cognitively heard, but it's experienced. And behind that experience of that beauty is backed with truth. And so that's true
Mhm.
beauty according to biblical view. The second thing I can mention is beauty is also defined by goodness. So when you experience true beauty, you're getting a taste of goodness again. Where depression is trying to tell you there's nothing good. There's no hope,
Mhm.
and there's
Yeah.
it's trying to tell you that the others. It's spiraling downward. Beauty is reminding you in a very aesthetic, experiential way that there still is goodness in the world and in life and what God is doing. It's posing an alternative form of reality that is counteracting depression, and without it,
Mhm.
sometimes we just keep spiraling downward into that tunnel, that dark tunnel. You know. So
Mhm.
that's a little bit, of how I see
Wow.
it. Yeah.
No, those are really powerful. I mean, the truth will set you free,
Hmm.
but
Right.
not just truth that hits our head or books that we're reading. I know in my hardest seasons of depression, I could not read. I
Right.
could not process propositional truth, but I could go outside and take a walk
Right.
and immerse myself in an experience, immerse myself in an experience of beauty. Now, it
Hmm.
didn't instantly snap me out of it,
Hmm.
but knowing and hearing the truth that beauty begins to affect you, that over the course of time, and I have repeated exposure, it did make a difference in my life. Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
and so I would, during those hard, dark, depressive, sad days, uh, I had to shift into my doing brain instead of my thinking brain,
Hmm.
and just get out of bed because I believed that it was healthy for me. It
Yes.
didn't feel healthy, but I
Hmm.
believed it was healthy for me. And then what prompted me to go outside and take a walk was I believed by blind faith that
Hmm.
it was good for my body and good for my mind to take a walk and get fresh air and to expose myself and immerse myself in beauty.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, when Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, he talks about
Mm,
the eyes, where you look, where you focus.
mm,
And the word in the Greek is haplous. If your eye is haplous, meaning either healthy, but literally means singular. It
mm,
has a lot to do with where we look. I think
mm,
depression constantly draws us to look at something that's very dark.
mhm,
It wants us to, depression causes us to focus, right? Really to focus in on something very dark. And so we're
mm,
constantly being reminded. It's almost a self-generating thing in our own souls that of this darkness. And beauty, however, says, you have a choice of where you look. Even for a moment, if you just took a glance at
mm,
beauty, you know, and it pulls you out a little bit. And that light then begins to enter back into your spirit through your eyes. But there is a choice that we can make it. And what you expressed there was wonderful. And the other thing you said was to immerse yourself. And that is something the Bible talks about too, is where we mentally immerse ourselves, you know, and in the moment we might not feel it. And that's the thing, is that's like in the
mhm,
moment we don't feel it. We don't feel the beauty, we don't feel the inspiration, but the choice that we make to take that first step to immerse ourselves in something different can make all the
mhm,
difference. And the other thing that I think you said that was very important was it's not like it cures everything instantly. And we can't expect that. But the range of beauty is what's wonderful, is that beauty can be small, beauty can be grand. And sometimes that first step when you're stuck in depression is to take on a small beauty, something
mm,
small that's gentle, that's like a whisper, that's calming, where we allow it to speak just a little bit into our spirits, you know. And when I say speak, oftentimes what it means is it's God speaking through that beauty. That's what I
mm,
yeah, it's God
mhm.
speaking his truths, his words of hope, of inspiration through that beauty, but it could be small, you know.
That's a good thought.
Yeah.
My small thing. So the big thing is going by the ocean or just taking a walk outside. And another passage that comes to mind is Jesus in Matthew 6, talking about how we do not be anxious. Look at the birds in the air and the lilies in the field. And so I happen to live at a place where I have birds right in our front yards that fly around sometimes,
Yeah.
and we have some greenery, although it's landscaped and manicured, because we live in Southern California where it's actually desert climate. So a lot of the water and the vegetation that we have is man curated.
Yeah.
It's not quite like the wilderness,
Yeah.
or the forests out there, which are also beautiful in their own sense. But as I immerse myself for a good 20, 30 minutes, it
Yes.
begins to change my mood
Yes.
more so than exercise.
Yes. Yeah. And I love that you reference that passage, because that passage uses the language of beauty, right? Because one of
Mm,
the examples it says is, look at the lilies of the field. Even Solomon in all of his splendor cannot compare to the lilies of the field, right? That word splendor is beauty. So even Solomon, all of his beauty, cannot compare to the beauty of the lily, and yet
Mm-hmm.
you are so much more, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's a reminder of your beauty, how beautiful you are before God, and that's why you don't have to worry, because you're worth that much more than even the thing that's even more beautiful than Solomon's splendor and beauty, you know?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you look at a small thing like a lily, you're going walking along a path, it could be a lily, a flower, and it's a small beauty, and you're reminded of, wow, that thing's so beautiful. And you think of that passage in Jesus' words, there's that truth again. Wait a minute. God's trying to make a point about my beauty. Even if I can't feel it or
Mm-hmm.
see it, right there's a visual example that is being an example to accentuate the beauty that God declares I have. And that's why I don't have to be
Mm-hmm.
anxious, you know? Yeah.
That's good. That's good. So both you and I have gone through seasons of depression,
Hmm.
and oftentimes in this conversation about mental health and getting well is so dominated by conversations about psychology and psychiatry, going for talk therapy and medication. And those are very powerful means of helping us in our recovery and dealing with those mental uh, illnesses, and whether it's short term or long term. But there are so many other things that can help us in our maintaining self care
Hmm.
and mental health. And we're talking about um, the role of beauty
Hmm.
in fighting back depression. So, um, just coming up with a list of those things can be really helpful.
Yeah.
We've talked about going outside. We've
Yeah.
talked about taking a walk. Um, Beauty can also refer to, I think we can refer to it as taste.
Hmm.
That in the Psalm, taste and see the Lord is good.
Yes.
And one of my areas of focus is when I'm going through a hard time, I say, I want to stay alive for the next steak dinner. And then when I get through that hard time, I celebrate by having a steak dinner.
Good for you.
What are some other things that you do, Brian? I know you
Oh,
create art, so
yes.
talk to us about art and creating art. And I know in some conversations in mental health, they talk about art therapy. So I think
Yeah.
that would be a good related topic.
That's a thank you for asking this. And yes, first of all, it is going to be different for different people, right?
Mm-hmm,
While true beauty is defined with objective standards, there's a huge room of subjectivity for how
mm-hmm,
each of us will experience beauty. And so that's going to be important for each person to discover what is it that different forms of beauty that can speak to each individual. What are the tastes that people have, the subjectivity
mm-hmm,
for that. So what works one person might not work for another. And for me,
mm-hmm,
you asked about my art. Behind me are my art pieces, and,
mm.
uh, and I have two responses to this. So for one, it's when I create art, it counteracts the effects of depression in the sense that depression wants to deconstruct, right? It
Mm.
wants to tear things down, it wants to fragment. It wants to tell me that things are no good, life is no good. Well,
Mm-hmm.
the art process is a creative process. It's creating. It's doing the is an opposite
Oh.
movement, opposite momentum of
Mm-hmm,
taking things that don't exist or things that are disassembled, like different colors of paint, and it's creating, something I
mm-hmm,
envision. So where depression tries to offer a very negative, gloomy view, or to tell
mm-hmm,
us that there is no hopeful vision, art actually is an accomplishing of a vision of something. So
mm,
that's that one. Um,
mm.
a second thing, actually, there's three, I guess. The second thing is sometimes in my artistic process, I might actually have to create what I feel. And I
Mm.
found that to be very therapeutic. And so sometimes the pieces that I create may not look very bright, you know, because I need to come to a understanding of where I'm at. Why am I feeling this way? And sometimes words don't do it. Just to simply say I
Mhm,
feel sad or that I'm hurting. Well, the word itself doesn't do it, but I can depict it. For some people, I think
Hmm.
it might be poetry or writing
Hmm.
a story. And I would bet there's so many in our as humans. There are so many creative ways we can try to express ourselves, even through fashion. What does it mean to express ourselves through fashion in terms of either what depression means to us or what a vision of hope would mean by the way we
Hmm.
assemble the way we dress. So sometimes my art pieces are therapeutic in the way that allows me to better grasp my depression currently. And then the third
Hmm.
thing is sometimes when I am in a state where, because depression wants to kill momentum, right? Like you said,
Hmm.
sometimes you don't want to get out of bed. Well, sometimes when I'm so depressed, it's hard to pick up a charcoal pencil or it's hard to pick up a paintbrush. The thing that I do is I don't force myself. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
If I'm capable of taking one step, that one step in creating may then create the inertia for me to take more steps. But if I can't seem to bring myself to taking that first step, I don't force myself. Because if I do, it only creates a cycle of the feeling of failure. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh,
I
yeah.
don't put pressure on myself in that way. So a
Hmm.
lot of times I may attempt to. I'll sit at my drafting table, I sit at my easel, and I may attempt to see if I can create the first stroke. If I just can't, then I don't. And what I do though then is I have multiple means of engaging beauty or creativity. And what I have is I have a bonsai garden. So if I can't create,
Oh.
I go and I sit in my bonsai garden. And I
Hmm.
look at the bonsai trees, and a bonsai is it's called the living art, right? These are trees that are growing, and there's some artistic shape to them, and they are developing art on their own because it's alive, and they're growing. So I let them do the art. Does that make sense? And so I sit in my bonsai garden and I just watch my bonsais. It's a small beauty. Again, not grand, but small.
Yes.
And I allow it to speak to me, and it's an immersive space that I can be in. And sometimes it's in the sunset, kind of a dusk sort of setting where the stars are
Hmm.
just coming out. And I allow the artistry of God to speak to me. And that's what I
Hmm.
do. If I can't create art, I allow the artistry of God to speak to me, and I don't force myself to try to create. Otherwise, it just creates that feeling of, man, why can't I get going? Kind of failure sort of feeling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The stuckness. It reinforces the
It
stuckness.
reinforces the stuckness, and then you self-condemn a little bit more.
Yes.
So that's part of the rhythm that I exercise.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. As you're describing all this, ideas are just sparking in my head
Yeah.
because the lie that depression tells me most often is that I'm worthless
Hmm.
and I have no value. And so,
Yeah.
in the doing of art, you actually experience that you do have value and that you can create.
Yes.
So, like you were describing, it counteracts that and just shifts us into a realizing we do have value and we can create something, even if it's darkness and then or sad images. There's a thing that we say in recovery that we don't want to suppress our feelings, we want to express, and so art
Right.
allows us to express
Mhm.
and get it out of us and onto the paper,
Yes.
so we can well have a healthy outlet. And
Hmm.
then one more thing I'll mention in as we circle around the final stretch, you're also a martial arts
Yes.
person. So I'm guessing black belt and different schools of things. So describe how martial arts is an expression of beauty and how that helps in your well-being and self-care and mental health.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that too. Yeah, I'm a certified Kung Fu master in Wing
Mm,
Chun. I've trained also in Northern Shaolin. I've been a Wing Chun grand champion in the tournament
mm,
too, an international tournament. And I teach. I teach others. And one of the things that I tell my students is, what I love about Kung Fu is that it promotes human flourishing, flourishing of not
mm,
just body, but of character and of mind. And you mentioned earlier that sometimes you don't want to exercise to feel better, right?
mhm,
So in Kung Fu, sometimes people think of Kung Fu as something very, very physical. There's that side of it where sometimes I feel great after I do a really hard workout. And that's usually more maybe the Northern Shaolin, and I'll hit the heavy
mm,
bat. I'll hit the wooden dummy. But there's actually a
mm,
side of it that's what I would call very poetic, and it
mhm,
slows you down. They're slower movements, they're beautiful movements, and you feel the movements. And there's a sense of peace that you feel in those movements. And part of it, I think I liken it to dance, because the movements
Hmm.
aren't just movements, it's art. So there's a way of expressing through those movements. There's a way of feeling flow. There's a way of feeling relaxation. And you learn to become mindful of tension and stress in your body.
Yeah.
As an example, there was one day I came home from work, and my wife sees me walk through the door, and she sees, like, and I sometimes, how people can see your emotions more clearly than what you're really feeling. So she sees it all over in my countenance. And I look dark, I look down, I look very down, like I had a very heavy day, and I look
Mm.
distraught. And right, I was in a feeling a bit depressed. I didn't know that, actually, because you're going through the motions of the day and you come through the door. But she says to me, she goes, "Go work out. Go to your training studio and go."
Hmm.
No, no, I'm okay. I'm okay. She goes, no. She takes my bag from me. She goes, go. And I didn't really want to, but it's kind of like like you just make the decision to do so. And having someone who knows you well enough like that helps a lot too. So she
Yes.
forced me out the door to my training studio, and I trained for like 20 minutes. I go through my forms, and after 20 minutes, I thought, wow, I feel a whole lot better. Like my mind felt like it was just, when I came through the door, my mind just felt like it was just like, bearing down by heavy
Hmm.
things. After
Hmm.
the martial arts, the kung fu, going through the forms, it just felt like everything just lifted. It didn't make
Amazing.
all the problems go away, but my
Hmm.
disposition had
Yes.
changed. So again, it's another form of artistry that has a
Yes.
spectrum of experience in it, and there's a beauty in that
Very
artistry
much.
that I experience. And it is different from, I think, doing art that involves mostly my hand, sitting in front
Hmm.
of my bonsai, that's more passive, and then
Hmm.
the martial art involves the whole body. So it's a very
Yes.
different experience. Yeah. And I would say, as my last, kind of encouragement is, sometimes we do need to find multiple avenues. And I think human
Hmm.
beings were built that way, being made in the image of God, that we have multiple creative means that will resonate with us. That's like a tune that speaks to our
Hmm.
soul, you know.
Hmm.
And for us just to take the time to figure what that is. And I remember talking to another fellow artist once who was struggling with anxiety, and he says, he forces himself to go for walks. I said, I know you. I bet when you go for walks, you feel more anxiety because you're thinking. He goes, "That's exactly it." He goes for a 30-minute walk and he's constantly thinking. I'm like, I think you need something else. But it's different for different people, and it's a matter of just
Yes.
figuring out what that artistic form is that will allow beauty to seep in to our minds and hearts. Yeah.
Yeah. We just need to give ourselves the permission and the freedom to experience all kinds of beauty.
Yes.
And then at different times, we'll need different ones. And
Yeah.
so the more exposure to these different ways of having beauty in our lives will just add so much self-care, so much joy, so much goodness,
Yes.
so much truth, and help us to flourish, as you mentioned. Now, how
Yeah.
do you, a little minor question, but big
Mhm.
for some people, how do you reconcile the your Christian faith with martial arts? Because some people
Mm.
are a little like, oh, Tai Chi or martial
Yeah.
arts, they look beautiful when they're doing some of those movements.
Mhm.
It's exciting watching the kung fu action adventure fight scenes.
Yeah.
The beautiful part is certainly very beautiful. How do you reconcile that with your faith?
Well, the first thing I think of on a big picture level is, the Christian faith, in its history, has always been very robust about redeeming things, even
Mm,
redeeming what may be considered pagan or
mm,
secular, and redeeming it for God's purposes, for God's glory. So we're unashamed, unafraid. And we're brave about redeeming, and that's the whole message of the gospel is redemption,
hmm.
redemption, redemption. And the other part of it is that by God's common grace, which I really believe in a lot, is that God's goodness can be found in all forms of cultural sources and traditions and practices. So we don't
Mm,
have to throw out everything, because we can find what's good that may be from God in that, right? And then the third thing I found is, when I have studied martial arts, and now it's been 30 years. I started when
hmm.
I was pretty young. I even started with my mom, and martial arts is run in my family. And I
Mm,
found that, the the spirituality of martial arts has historically been associated with kung fu, um, but you don't have to practice kung fu with that association. And
Mm,
I choose as a person of faith in the Lord that I associate the biblical teachings with kung fu.
mm,
And a lot of the philosophical principles of kung fu actually are congruent and supportive of biblical teachings, you know.
mm,
And so, where it is congruent, I use that. And how it is spiritual for me is when I practice my like Tai Chi or the Bak Mei fist that I do. That's also very fluid. It's very
mhm,
prayerful for me. So during
mm,
that time,
mm,
I'm talking to God. You know, that's my spiritual association with it, and how kung fu has been an avenue for spiritualities. It's prayerful, it's meditative, is contemplative for me. Yeah, on the Lord.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Thank you. Well, it's been a beautiful conversation. I think we've covered a lot of ground, so there's a lot of gold nuggets in here. And thank you for being a friend on this journey with me. I know you were right there with me when I was going through my hard time in 2017, and we continue to stay in touch here over Zoom and occasionally over coffee. So wherever the Lord leads you, I know that we'll continue to be friends near and far. So
Yes,
thank you so much,
absolutely.
Brian. Now, if someone wants to stay in touch with you on social or web, how can they do that?
Well, they can find my Instagram handle, Brian with an I, SEE, Chan, CHAN. And that's my Instagram handle. That's one of the best ways to connect with me. You can see my artwork on my
Mm,
Instagram as well. And it's and on Facebook as well too, Brian S. Chan on Facebook. So that's a great way to find me as well too. Soon, a website will be launched. And it's a website that is promoting the questing for true beauty, and it's going to be
mm.
called Luminary Warrior. And it should be up in probably in a couple of weeks, I think. LuminaryWarrior.com.
Very
Yeah.
good. Okay, well, I have those in the show notes at Erasing Shame.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much, Brian. Blessing to you.
Thank you, DJ.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Erasing Shame podcast. Check out the show notes at erasingshame.com and subscribe to our email for updates. We would love to hear from you, so please add your comments at our website or on social. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any podcast app, and you can also subscribe on YouTube or follow on Facebook. Please add a rating and reviews so we can reach more people with our message of health, hope, and compassion. This podcast is the digital outreach of Christian Asian mental health.